with people in ways other than clinically, and so I would be interested in hearing about the various ways that you all are interacting with people.
Right now, we're just doing a lot of videos, exercise videos for the swim team. You know, that's the only way right now on western side of the state we can interact. Basically, I mean, we're restricted. There's no person-to-person contact right now, and that's making it hard on everybody. So we should know, hopefully, at 2 o'clock here, more people the restrictions are going to loosen up even more. But we've heard it from our police department, too, that domestic violence is up. And, you know, I'm worried about if you read things from overseas, their depression rate, especially amongst kids, is skyrocketing. You know, these kids, and I'll take my son as an example. I want to go back to school. I want to do this. But, you know, the virus is hurting us. I want to, you know.
Right.
There's going to be all kinds of things coming out of this that we typically wouldn't have because of the shelter in place.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit to that when it comes to statistics with mental health. We are seeing increased rates of anxiety and depression. We know that it's affecting across the age span in terms of just how everybody is coping with what's going on. And there are some serious concerns about kind of secondary deaths with COVID-19. So not necessarily from COVID itself, but from suicide and from you know, domestic violence, all those different things that could be contributing factors as a result of some of what is going on with the economic instability, with shelter in place, all those different things. So it's definitely a major concern. But doing different classes where you're still pulling people in and building community can be really helpful during this time, because it does help us with remembering that we're not alone. We do a lot of different programs with middle school and high school students. A lot of the feedback that we're getting are kind of on the extreme sides. So people who are really struggling with not going to school, with not seeing their friends, or different structures that are happening within the home, not having maybe the same schedule or the routine that they had, as well as not having the same space that they once had. So, you know, especially with our middle and high school kids, there was probably a little more independence prior to COVID-19 in some homes, or the other way around. They had a little more support from their parents, but maybe not having that now because their parents are working a different schedule. The other side of that too is that we are seeing some kids who are really thriving in this environment. So they're feeling relieved that they don't have the social pressures at school, that they're not being bullied right now, or having to worry about what outfit that they have to dress in, and they're alleviating some of those different stresses that they've had before, but also feel some guilt to that because, you know, they know some of their friends are struggling with it, but here they are happy not going to school or having that different structure. So those are some of the different things that we have seen as an organization in talking with our youth.
Hey, Ann, have you seen elevated levels of domestic abuse in your center?
You know, we have not, but I think the assumption, and I think it's fairly accurate, is that our numbers have stayed fairly consistent. So we have continued to see about the same numbers of folks reaching out as have before. But I also think there is some concern about people's access, that because most people access our services through the phone and they call us first. If you're in a position where your abuser is in the house with you 24/7, you can't make a phone call. You know, before people would have an abuser go to work or even just, you know, out to the bars or whatever. And now I think people's access is really restricted. What we also have seen though, and Marissa may have seen some of this as well, is that it's not, we have a lot of clients who are sort of skating on the financial margins, who either because of the isolation or people who have left abusive relationships and are working with us to become self-sufficient are just kind of barely getting by. And those are the folks who may be in low-skilled jobs, so they may have lost their jobs. They are folks who are really struggling financially right now, and the after effects of the COVID pandemic, I think, have sort of sent a lot of them over the edge. So we've had a lot of clients and former clients reaching out to us because they really need our financial assistance and help in that way, because and we don't want anybody in a position where they financially have no choice but to return to an abusive situation. So those are some of the things that we're sort of struggling with.
Okay. I see some more people have joined us. We're sort of just starting out and asking questions, general questions about what we're seeing and ways we can reach our community. For those of you who do not or a little shy about asking a question online, we have a chat box that Nikki and I are both monitoring. If you have a question, you can enter it in the chat box. And also, as we ask at every roundtable, if you could put your name and email address in that chat box, that would be awesome also. That way we could send you a download of the chat box and where you can tune into the video again. So that would be helpful.
And Dan,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do see a chat or a message in there asking about some maybe helpful activities for mindfulness or reflection, especially as maybe camps start to open up. So mindfulness is a fantastic, way to really help with our mental health. If you're out in nature, so we can definitely do different kinds of mindfulness activity, and even listening to the different sounds, using all their different senses to really kind of be in that present moment in the here and the now. And then, and I can, Dan, send you some different kinds of activities that could be shared then out, if that would be helpful for individuals. And then I think as camps begin to open, one activity that we've done, which has been really interesting to kind of hear the different responses, is that we had individuals write a letter to COVID. And so it was Dear COVID, and they wrote down kind of all their thoughts, whatever kind of came out. And then we talked about that and kind of shared what are some of the different things that we're feeling with it. And then we reversed it, and COVID wrote a letter back. And it was just a different kind of perspective to be able to look at what's going on around. And that was an activity that our middle school and our high school kids both really enjoyed, of kind of seeing those different sides. But we do have tons of different mindfulness activities. Those can all be really helpful. I think any way that we can still build connection. So obviously camp's gonna look different this year. And I know that's one of our big questions of what is that really gonna look like? But anytime that we can still do things that are building that community is really important. So not only that alone work or that reflection, but also how do we get people to still interact together while following the whatever protocols are in place at the time with social distancing, mask wearing, whatever it might be. So how do we still really encourage that team building? How do we build that community? And I think those activities are going to be even more important now as we start to be able to come back together.
I just want to echo what Marissa said, because our clients have used a lot of those mindfulness activities, and they are a great resource. The Jana Marie Foundation is a great resource for those kinds of activities. So I would encourage you to really take advantage of those. The other thing that I think is very true is that we have an experience where we moved to doing services remotely, including our support groups. And we were able to do a phone call with our support groups after a period when they weren't meeting. Folks in that group found that very helpful. When we were able to do a Zoom call, actually we used a different platform, but where people could actually see each other's faces, it added a whole another level of interaction. And so I think part of what we want to be thinking about is, how do we, if we can't physically be together, what are the things we can do to be as close as, to approximate that as closely as we can? Because I think it makes a difference.
Wait. I got a question. What's anybody doing? You know, we're allowed to open camp in green and phase out. What happens if you go back? What's anybody doing if the governor takes your county back to yellow?
I know one thing that we're doing is we are actually going to do virtual camps. We are figuring out exactly what that looks like, but it's going to be 2 hours. So from 10 to 12 is kind of the time frame that our kiddos thought would work best for them, because they don't have to get up too early and they still get the afternoon. We are going to give them a list of supplies ahead of time. We're going to try to be getting outdoors every time with those camps, as well as doing mindfulness each time. And then doing different things like we do a lot with drumming and a lot with art, those types of things. So still kind of trying to bring in that music and that art component to it as well.
Because a lot of we're in a unique situation where our families are going to need daycare basically is what they're going to have to use camp for, because they got to go back to work. And, you know, if, you know, like if you were a business, you could get a waiver in April. Now it's like, oh, yeah, we gave them out in April, sorry. And it's like, well, wait a second, you know.
Yeah. I have a question. So voting and those types of things have now opened up. Is that across the state? Is that correct?
Yes.
So are you still able to do things like single kayaks and stuff like that during the summertime for some kinds of camps, or?
That's a big discussion right now. Earlier today, we had a summer camp or camp roundtable where we were discussing a lot of issues like that. And again, it depends on geography, where you're located, because a lot of counties are still red. Mm-hmm. You know, the yellow ones are the ones that are even considering it. But you know, there's mixed guidelines from the CDC and the governor's office, and so one of the things that PRPS is trying to do is we're trying to unify that and get one set of agreeable guidelines together. And so we've been working. We sent off our best interpretation to the governor's office about a week ago, I guess it was, Nikki, and we're still waiting to hear back from. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of definitive information. But that is what it is right now, and well, all our recreation departments are working through that. Jason, you want to add as a?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the.
You're in the red zone still, right?
Yeah, we're still in the red. I think I'm a little crazier than most Parks and Rec directors. I plan on doing camps in yellow, you know, and following all the safety guidelines, obviously. So, but yeah, I think most people across the state are wanting to provide services, but of course, having to understand the guidelines and then run that through elected officials, insurance, and solicitors and all that boring stuff before they can really decide if it's feasible. And we're, of course, running into the time crunch of parents need the childcare. And they need to know, you know, 5 weeks ago what we're doing, but we can't really provide answers right now. So, yeah, it's a challenging situation. But you know, as community leaders, we kind of are faced with a difficult time, and we just have to make the best decision we can with whatever information we have, you know, based on our deadlines.
Thank you.
Marissa and I have a question here. That we did solicit some questions before, and I just wanted to ask you one of them is, what population do you think is most at risk during this time of social isolation?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would almost defer to Marissa, because I think my feeling would be young adults and those in their early to mid 20s. That tends to be a pretty social population generally. where the development of relationships and friendships is really critical. The difficulty with that, or maybe the upside of that, is that one of the things Marissa shared is that there are some kids for whom not having the pressure of social relationships actually is good because they've not experienced those in positive ways. But generally speaking, I would say probably teens and those in their early to mid 20s. But Marissa may have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have not seen any statistics on that. My gut feeling is kind of where Anne is at, but also I think, our middle-aged kind of population is also still really at risk because they're dealing with a lot of maybe financial insecurity that they haven't been dealing with before, trying to figure out how to balance schedules. Sometimes, a whole new work schedule, not getting to interact. I mean, I know from my standpoint, I don't get to interact with any other adults rather than on Zoom a lot of times, just because I'm here alone all day with a 4-year-old. My husband's still at work, but by the time he gets home, like, we're doing bedtime routine. And so I know there's just been changes along, with all of that age range. And then also I know our senior population, if they're living in a group home anywhere, they are doing one-on-one activities. They're not even necessarily seeing other individuals who are living in the same residence as they are. They're not having that same contact with their families. So there's just, I don't know if there's any one answer to that. I think every population is kind of at risk, but in different kinds of ways, which really did not answer your question whatsoever.
I think it's really true. I think Marissa hit it right on the head. I think that's absolutely true. I have a father who's 88 and in a retirement community in Colorado, which most of the time provides him lots of interaction. They have, he plays bridge and goes to Bible study and they have lunches together, and now none of that is happening. And he's there by himself. His family can't even come and visit. So that has been very difficult for him to adjust to that.
Yeah. And kind of speaking on that older population, I see BK asked, what kind of, I think this is more for you guys, but what sort of resources, programs, activities are folks planning for the older populations and more vulnerable populations in your communities?
Well, I can speak. I'm like Anne. My parents are in an assisted living facility, and no one's been allowed in or out since mid-March. And it's working well, and we're very happy about that. But it's hard to do an activity with people who are in those sort of facilities, and I think it's pretty universal across Pennsylvania, maybe even across the country. TR, or therapeutic recreation, is about the only contact that we have, and it's a lot of individualized things.
I know we've done some coffee hours as a foundation, and on that has been some individuals who are running some assisted living facilities, and they're looking for some unique ways to try to bring entertainment. So they did one group did a Mother's Day parade, and they're going to do the same for a Father's Day, where people can decorate their cars and drive by, and residents would be able to look out and see. And then also there was a home that brought people and had them play instruments outside and draw with chalk outside. And once again, windows could be open and they could hear these different kinds of things. So I think it's a lot of trying to find some unique ways to still build that community. Even pen pals. I mean, some of you guys are doing camp. That I know that was something that has been talked about quite a bit, is some pen pal kind of letters back and forth between campers and between individuals who might be living in an assisted living environment.
What are you seeing with like the special needs population? Are you seeing any regression with like the autistic population?
That's always a concern for us, I think. because that's a population that's so vulnerable. I think that we, you know, when we have adults with, say, developmental disabilities or even physical disabilities who may be vulnerable to caregivers or may just not even have caregivers, but can function in environments. I think one of the things that we do is reach out really to our partners in the community. So we work a lot with folks who have expertise in that area. But that's definitely a concern because that's a very vulnerable population to abuse.
I have another.
Oh.
No, go ahead, Marissa.
I was just going to say, I saw in the chat box from the last session, there were some questions about signs or things that could be used to kind of identify for mental health or different things like that. And there is the 5 signs is called, and it's 5 kind of smiley faces or 5 faces that have different expressions on it. And they have a whole bunch of different kinds of posters and signage that is available out there, and that can be something that's really helpful and could be used within your settings on like bulletin boards and things like that to help people identify those signs.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of touching on what Ann said earlier is one of the big concerns that I think are across the board is that when there's school and there's different activities and groups, there's more eyes watching our kiddos and making sure that we're identifying when we might be seeing warning signs or changes in those behaviors. And then from there, you know, we can ask some questions to see what might be going on, whether it's typical adolescent development, whether it's something mental health, whether it's something with abuse, whatever it might be. When people are kind of staying at home, we don't have as many eyes watching these kids to kind of check and see whenever there might be something going on. So I know that like Ann's group, Center Safe, in collaboration with many others, offers like Stewards to Children. That is a fantastic training program. It's Ann can probably tell you more. It's about an hour-and-a-half training, but it helps you identify those warning signs for child abuse. There's also QPR, which is suicide prevention. There's mental health courses out there. So even taking some of those courses, you know, if you're able to, prior to camp starting back up and things, it might help you be just a little bit more vigilant in watching for some of those different warning signs or red flags that we might see in someone.
And I would, just to follow up on that, because I think Marissa's absolutely right. Those are the kinds of things that can be offered virtually to your population, so that if you have clients or participants who are interested, now's a perfect opportunity to say, this is part of our mandate is to pay attention to some of these sort of health and wellness activities, and here are some things that we've got lined up for you so that you can participate and do that and learn more.
I remember from my school days that every teacher had to take that 2.5-hour online course for identifying child abuse. And it was offered free through the University of Pittsburgh, I think.
There is. There are actually 2. There is a training for mandated reporters.
Right, that was
all of you are mandated reporters, and that is available online, but it's also available. There are folks who do that. You can do it virtually in Zoom platforms. We just had all of our staff had to re-up their certification, for example, and so our director of volunteer programs, who's our mandated reporter trainer, did it in a Zoom format, which is actually a little bit more interactive than the PIT website, although the information is much the same. So that is one of the things. The Stewards of Children training that Marissa was talking about is, again, something that we can get you linked up with if you'd like. That really is, it's not for mandated reporters per se, but it's kind of for anybody who cares about kids. I would recommend, one of my former colleagues used to say, it's the people, as soon as somebody has a child, they should do this training, because it really prepares you to be paying attention to the things you want to be talking to your kids about, the things you want to be paying attention to in terms of signs and symptoms of child sexual abuse, and ways to respond if your child does disclose. So it's a great program for parents or for anybody who cares about kids who may not be a mandated reporter and have legal obligations to report.
Thank you, Ann. If you don't mind, I'd like to go to another question that was submitted beforehand. So you guys, both you and Marissa have ideas of what Parks and Rec programs can offer, and they were wondering what Park and Rec program or initiative would you think is most effective at improving community mental health, or what kind of characteristics would you hope to find in a program?
That's a really good question. I have to think
Yeah, we're pretty smart. We come up with some.
We're pretty smart. I have to
Yeah.
think about that for a minute.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And I think so many of your programs already touch on it. So I grew up in Center County, but my family lives right on their property butts up against Whipple Dam State Park. And then we also go to Greenwood Furnace all the time, and grew up kind of in all the different state parks. And I think so many of your programs already do such a great job at really providing space to be in the outdoors, which we know can be so good for our mental health, getting outside, getting in nature, seeing that fresh air, which is great. I think the mindfulness activities are great. I know I used to do yoga on the beach at Whipple Dam, and that was like my favorite, just because it just, kind of combined everything that I love doing. I know that up in this area, they've done campfires on the beach as well with live music. That's really, that's a little bit more challenging right now just because of where we're at with COVID-19. But I know that really built community. Like, the locals really came out for that, and everybody would have a picnic kind of together and kind of potluck style. And so some of those things really help. And all of that really adds to our mental health and wellness. So I think just continuing to do activities kind of that pull those things together. So yoga on the beach, or doing some meditation classes, in the woods, even hiking, and using those five senses, taking stops along the way, and, what sounds are we hearing, or what are we smelling at this point, or those can all be really helpful when it comes to our mental health and wellness.
And I just want to follow up on that, because I think Marissa's, what she's describing is really a holistic approach to Parks and Rec that really incorporates the mindfulness and and works on the mind-body connection, and then the connection and community. So any activity that facilitates community building and is approached in a holistic way, I think is going to facilitate. One of the things that we know is that when you have healthy relationships in a community, and when you have healthy sort of mind-body connections, that means your interpersonal relationships, the relationships you have with your spouse, with your kids, are all going to be healthier relationships once those two things are in play.
I have a kind of a follow-up question to those responses. I think you're totally right that, most of Parks and Rec programming holistically improves mental health, but I think we typically don't market those programs as benefiting in the mental health sphere. So kind of given that, we kind of under the general understanding that everybody's mental health has taken a beating over the last few months, should we kind of shift and say, hey, if you're struggling, do X, Y, and Z program? Like, should we make that marketing shift to kind of make the conversation more direct about mental health and what we're currently doing?
I totally would do that. I don't know if you've all heard there was a story on NPR on WPSU this morning on the radio that just sort of was exploring what people have been doing during COVID. And one of the things that one of the people said is that as he's been home, they live on the edge of the Allegheny National Forest, and that he's had the opportunity to go and do hiking with his 3 kids and his spouse. And before, every night was scheduled with soccer or baseball or whatever. And now they have the time to actually explore the forest that is right up against their house together as a family. And I thought, and he was just talking about how valuable that was. And I thought I think you absolutely should be capitalizing and taking advantage of that.
I fully agree with that as well. And I know one thing that was done up here is with the community foundation, and I don't remember who all was involved in it, but they did they worked with doctors to prescribe getting outdoors. So it's like an RX to get out into the state parks and into the nature and to go on hikes. And they did like a really big push about how the tie-in between mental wellness and spending time outdoors. And then they arranged some community type hikes and things like that really drove people out. And then, like I said, worked with the physicians up in the area to also have a prescription pad, so to speak, that also would prescribe people to go outside, and get fresh air 10 minutes a day or whatever it might be. Yes, Centered Outdoors is what it was called. And thank you. And so those are some kind of neat ways too to kind of branch out and build partnerships that are just beyond your organization, but really looking at who else can we pull in, what other kind of community connections can we take advantage so we don't have to reinvent all these different programs ourselves, but instead really tap into those expertise of people within your communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something we got to build on going forward. I think this whole pandemic has exposed that we need to get outside more as a society. We need, and I'll use my own case, we're along the Montour Trail, which is eventually going to run from Pittsburgh to DC, and it's going to connect up. And just because, it hasn't been hockey and taekwondo and everything every night, we've been out on the trail, we've walked around lakes, and, you can see the relaxation and the different things it's helping with.
Well, and it gives you an opportunity to connect in a healthy way to your families, because you're not in front of the TV, you're not doing any kind of organized activity except walking and spending time with each other and being present to each other, and that's what builds healthy relationships.
Well, it was different. Like, we had 3 or 4 days of rain in a row, and it was like, all right, I'm ready to kill everybody. Yeah, I mean, it's pouring down rain. You couldn't go out anywhere. You couldn't do anything. It's like, I can't even go to the mall and walk. I can't,
Yep. I got to get out. Yep.
I still sent my 4-year-old out.
Yeah.
I got a 13-year-old son. He's like, nope.
So Alicia wrote in, any ideas for social media content regarding mental health? And it just so happens we wanted to share something with everyone today. So I'm going to just share my screen for a minute and then hopefully get some comments from everybody on what do they think of these. We're thinking of putting these things out, or we have put these things out on social media. Which shows parents doing other things besides some of the usual activities for parents. And so these were some of the products of our Health Committee efforts to try to get everyone outdoors and doing some healthy things with their time for COVID-19.
I think those are great.
I think they are too. I think PRPS should send them out, and we're gonna have to run them by our managers or whatever, but I think they'd be great to share. Like, let's get out, let's
Emily, can I pick on you to give us an idea, a timeline, or when we're going to start sharing all that?
You can pick on me. Yes, we actually have one of those graphics is posted on our website right now, on the PRPS pandemic website. And I believe the other one is graphic will be going out over the next week and will then further be posted on the pandemic website. So you can look for it there, and I will provide you guys with the link here in the chat box. So thanks for the feedback too.
Yeah.
We need to sell it more, because overseas, and I can't remember in Japan what it's called, doctors, instead of prescribing pills, hey, guess what? Get out, a half hour in nature 3 times a week.
It's called Shinrin-yoku.
There
I
it
put
is.
it in the chat for people if you want to search it. It's called forest bathing.
Can you describe that a little bit, Jane?
Yeah, there's like simple principles of getting out into nature and absorbing it. I looked it up again. I have a book on it. But I have seen parks departments, I know like Lancaster area, they had an organized actual like event for it that I thought was really cool. And the Manatee Conservancy locally actually did a whole program on it. So I actually wanted to put something together here, East Hanover Township, Dauphin County. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. But I did put in the chat, Shinrin-yoku, if you want to find it. There's just simple steps to it, like don't take any technology out with you, so you can be like fully present. Don't have any goals or expectations going into your actual walk. They tell you to like keep your heart rate at a certain heart rate. So like don't exceed, your point is to not just get through it. The point is to actually intentionally slow down, to pause the time to time to actually take in your surroundings. It's, it's fairly simple, but with today in the way humans operate, we're already looking at the finish line before we even really get started sometimes. Mm-hmm. So even when you're just saying, oh, we're going to go out on a hike, I don't know if anybody else's kids might have even heard of like, oh, well, how long is this going to take? Because like sometimes they already have something in mind that they want to get back to or do, so it's just about the whole disconnecting and giving yourself the proper time you need to absorb. But I've read a lot of studies on how much even just like changing your workspace and showing a picture of nature in your office space, what that does to a person versus not having it, right? So if you don't have a window, put pictures of trees in your office, kind of starts working into that conversation mentality that we actually physically really kind of need nature. Mm-hmm. So this is a nice practice to get into. It's very like meditative. So definitely to be done in smaller groups, because you could do that, spread out enough and smaller groups just to follow the social distancing, but actually really get to absorb something and not have somebody else interfere with that.
Thanks, Jane.
Yep.
Some other nature things. There are nature like mandalas that can be created. So circles using like rocks and leaves and all those kind of things. And there are some amazing ones. And there may be people in your community, like partnering with an art group or something, that can come and build them in your park at random places. So there's stuff like that maybe could be done. That could be one person, but then people would see it on their trail walking. So that might be an idea. I had another one too I just thought of, but I lost it. So, but some of that stuff can be really neat to do.
I also wanted to ask another question of Ann and Marissa is, a lot of our folks here have been forced to, work in very unusual circumstances, change plans almost by the hour sometimes, depending on what various organizations and authorities say. They're stuck in the middle between, people who want to love the parks to death and, regulations that say we have to, close the parks or close this and that. What kind of advice can you give to them as far as maintaining their mental health and not, strangling their kids or whatever?
I think self-care is just critical. It's just absolutely critical. I think that it is so easy to get overwhelmed right now with, and even as we might get excited, we've experienced this here, sort of excited and anticipatory of moving out of red into yellow in Center County, and then thinking about what does green look like. Just the thought of all of the pieces of that have to fit together can be really overwhelming. And so I think it's really critical to disconnect at times and to say, okay, I am not going to be on the computer until all hours of the night. I am going to schedule time during my day to get outside. I am going to take some time for that mindfulness activity and to just sit and breathe. Because if you're not paying attention to your own self-care, you'll be totally overwhelmed, I think.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think routine is so important. And one of the things that have been kind of lacking with all of this, oftentimes it's kind of the last thing we put out there because there's so many other things to do, but keeping some kind of routine and, or even writing in your calendar, like this time to this time is me time and what I need. And then also kind of thinking about what's in your control at that moment. So it's really easy to kind of let all the different things that are happening in the world kind of come in and make us feel really overwhelmed really quickly. Am I going to be able to run this summer camp? Can I do this? Can I do that? So instead of thinking about all those different thoughts, really taking that deep breath and thinking for a second, okay, what do I have control over in this minute? You know, what do I truly have control over? So we can control our reactions. We can control our thoughts. We can control how much news we're allowing to come in, or social media that we're allowing, or time on technology. Those are all things that we have control over. We can't control when we're going to move from yellow to green or red to yellow or back again or whatever it might be. We can't control how long this is going to last, or what the new recommendations will be. And so really taking that time to just look at, here's what I can control. I can bring my best self forward by focusing on these things, and it might not go as planned, and that's going to be really tough, but at least I know I'm doing the best that I can do by keeping on control of what I have.
And I think part of that is giving yourself a break and not feeling as if the things that are really out of your control that you still have to be in charge of. I think part of what I have tried to say to people is everybody needs to start cutting themselves a little bit of slack right now, because it is really easy to get so sucked into, I have to figure all this out and there's so much on my plate, and everybody needs to, you know what, one of my favorite singers says, everything that's not done at the end of the day, you need to just let go. Just let it go, and we'll pick it back up again tomorrow. It's not like we're blowing it off, but at the end of the day, what's done is done, and you'll sleep better if you can get there.
There was some psychologists put out a thing on Facebook, and it was really kind of looking at some of those different kinds of questions. And it's, what am I doing each day to get moving? What am I doing each day to get connecting with other people? What am I doing each day for my own self-care? What am I letting go of each day? So really taking a second to kind of look at those things, and then making sure we're not only so focused on everybody else's needs, that we're also taking that time for ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, good. Thanks. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Someone
It
that's
just
gone
gave me-
from
It just gave me license to leave work today and not feel bad.
There you go.
Problem.
Yeah.
everybody
Not good
enjoyed the
from
long.
disconnecting the hours we normally operate in at all to work at home and have my children that I still need to take care of and get them through schooling. Like, I'm having disgusting anxiety issues over, like, I want to take them out and hike right now. They clearly need to get out. This is not healthy for them. But how do I disconnect from my schedule when I have X, Y, and Z still I need to focus on and get done? And like tell myself, yeah, 7 p.m.'s fine, Jane. Get back to it at like 7. Come back to it later. I am really not good at weekends. I shut off like that if I don't have an event or anything. But during the weekday, I'm like, okay, from this time to this time, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not good at that.
It's too tempting when your office is in your house. It's just too tempting to, you know.
I think everyone's struggling with that right now. Like, it's weird because everything's shut down. So it's like, well, I can actually leave my cell phone at home when we go out at night because no one's calling. There's no reason to call, and you do relax a lot more right now.
Yeah, but it is really hard. And I think part of it is giving yourself that permission to not do what you normally do, right? It's so different when we are in person working together versus sitting at a screen and staring at it all day. I know Allie and I were just talking about this, that, you know, I could go all day from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. in person and still feel energized at the end of the day. And now if I'm on the screen for like 4 hours in a row, I'm drained. Like, I'm just done and I don't want to be on it anymore. And so I think it's also setting up reasonable expectations, right? Like, we're not meant to sit in front of a computer screen with not a lot of other interaction and stuff, and also trying to balance schoolwork for our kids and still take care of a house and still do the outdoor stuff that needs to be done, like our lawn or our flowers. We're not meant to be able to do all of that. And so it's also just setting up, okay, I'm going to work for, you know, changing that schedule. I'm going to try to work for 2 hours. And then I have an hour break in the morning and in the afternoon where my 4-year-old and I, we go out and we do something. So whether it's riding bikes or the scooters or going on a hike, or, you know, I try to block that into my time so that I can get refreshed and then I can be a better parent, a better employee, get my work done. So it's just allowing yourself that just knowing that, kind of setting those reasonable expectations that are different than when we're in person.
And I just want to echo that, because I remember when I used to be in the office all the time. I typically bring my lunch to work, sit in front of my computer, eat at my desk. And now I've gotten much more intentional about, I'm going to take 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to go, my husband's retired, so I'm going to go upstairs and have lunch with my husband, or I'm going to go sit on the back deck, and I'm going to carve out that time during the day, which I should have been doing all along, and even when I'm in the office, but I wasn't. And so now it feels really vital to my mental health to be able to do that. And get away from the screen, because it's one Zoom call after another.
I think we're going to see a lot more people doing that, especially the people who are laid off. They're going to, you know what, I was out more, I'm more relaxed, I'm a little healthier. They got to start living better, you know, and what's the best alternative for that? You know, is it an expensive gym? Can I get out to nature? What's the local rec departments or local whatever offering, you know? And I think, Dan and Emily and Nikki, we do need to tell how much that the rec departments can offer in the way of mental health, just, you know, exercise. And, you know, it's going to affect health, not only physically, but mentally.
Well, and I think a way to think about that is this pandemic sort of offers us, it sort of has brought our normal way of doing things to a hard, fast stop. And it offers us some opportunities to think about the way we live our lives and do things in some different kinds of ways. And so I think in some ways what could be really helpful for the Parks and Rec folks is to help spur those conversations about what could that look like. Exactly what you said. You know, maybe that means, you know, we're not going to go back to having sports scheduled every night. We're going to have some family time that is unstructured outside, or, you know, how are we going to pivot and maintain and learn some new things as a result of this?
Yeah, good point. And, you know, another piece that has come to light today actually was, as I mentioned earlier, we, or people in the field, are dealing with folks who have very different opinions about when things should be open and when they should not be open. And their personal comfort levels with various levels of protection or and safeguards that are being put on programs. And Megan, I'm thinking specifically of Megan, who, well, Megan, maybe are you there, and maybe you would like to explain a little bit? No, maybe not. But they were marking out their, or they were closing a park. Is that what they were doing, Nikki?
Sorry, I'm here. I just had to get something off the printer. How are you guys?
Good. I was just bringing up your predicament that you described in your email today.
Yes. Unfortunately, we had a not nice incident from a organized group of civil disobedience folks who met at the park, again, pre-planned, and went over and admittedly took down our caution tape. And then when my boss, we were all actually at the park, I physically saw them do this. My manager had gone over and said, you know, sorry guys, but the park is closed, and was met with some hostility, you know, who the heck are you, that sort of thing. She did not engage, and she left and called our police chief. And, you know, we had made a post, you know, approved by council that day to just reiterate, you know, we're in Bucks County, by the way. You know, our area is still red, and we're just, you know, abiding by the governor's mandates. And these people had said it's slander, you know, no names were mentioned. It turns out these people don't even live in our borough. You know, and you have polar opposites. You have people who think they're heroes and let's open up the parks, and then you have people who are respecting, you know, the rules and regulations set in place. So, you know, from what I'm gathering, and again, you can go down a rabbit hole of clicking, but it seems these people, you know, quote unquote, these people are organizing for this weekend, and I can't find any more information, but I don't know how others are dealing, if they are dealing with this. You know, it's they're saying it's our tax money, it's our park. Our chief has said that if they see anything, you know, some folks can be arrested because you're tampering with public property. Yet the other end of the argument is that public property is our property, we paid for it. So definitely struggling with how to keep people, you know, I get it. They want sunshine, you know, they want exercising, but we also reiterate with our parks are open, the open spaces, have a Frisbee toss, fly a kite, things like that. But it was not a nice situation, and it expanded into a very, very political bashing on the comments. And we unfortunately cannot hide the comments due to legal reasons. So it's all out there if anybody's interested. Percy Borough Facebook, but it's been frustrating.
It is.
Well,
we've had people, you know, organize on our fields too. We're like, look, they're closed. You can't have this many people. Well, and they start, and I'm like, well, call the governor. You know, their rules. We're just enforcing what we're told to. You know,
and
we can't forego if they're going to withhold money from us. We can't let you do this. You know, it's a budgetary thing too. You know, people got to realize we got to follow their rules.
Well, and a shame of it, Megan, I did look at the link you sent in your email, and I looked at some of the comments, because, I mean, PRPS alone is not, we've had our own comments on Facebook. I mean, we all have, and, you know, some of them, they're just trolls. They don't have real accounts, and they just instigate these negative comments, and it's a shame, because that's all they're doing, is they want to stir trouble, and they don't have the reality of the situation. So then it creates problems for our professionals, and they don't understand that, you know, we more than anyone want our facilities open.
Exactly. I think that they think that we don't, like, we want these open as well. I mean, I'm sure, you know, my kid's crying when we drive by a playground, but the other piece is, I think the public perception is, you know, quote unquote, our police didn't do anything. Well, no, they drove by. They did not want to engage. This particular person, you know, he was on a mission. You could just tell his mannerisms. You know, they took video of our public works employee. You can hear them interrogating him. You know, per our chief, people are allowed to video us since we're public employees. But you know, they didn't want it to expand into something really negative, you know, but I was also told if they're caught taking down tape, they can be arrested. And I have this fear that somebody would be there, obviously videoing, and half the people would think he's a hero, and the other half would just think, you know, oh, we need to follow some rules. So I just saw a news article that apparently all of Pennsylvania is going yellow June 5th. I know we don't have much time before 2 o'clock, but I'm very interested to see what the governor says.
I think we all are.
And we're in yellow. It's not much different than red.
That's the other piece is,
It's not. I hate to.
I don't
be
think
killjoy,
I'm
but
to join the yellow crew yet either. I don't think they're going to announce Dolphin today.
It's
So,
not much different.
You know, sort of to sum it up, because I do, I'm very conscious of our time here. And so Ann and Marissa, just how do we keep our heads while everybody else is losing theirs? I guess is the main question here.
You know, I wish that I had a better answer to this, but I really do think, and this is the long strategy, right? This is not the meeting the immediate need of the political divide right now. But the long strategy is to reframe the conversation to get at one of the things that Marissa has talked a lot about, which is what kind of community do we want? You know, people have framed the issue of mask wearing, for example, as an impingement on their freedom. We need to think about that and reframe those conversations as, this is not an impingement on my freedom. This is how I am being a good community partner. This is how I am doing the right thing for the people around me. This is how I am engaged in healthy community relationships. We need to kind of reframe that conversation. Now that's the long view. You know, that doesn't help in the immediate need of people are going to be in your parks on Saturday throwing a fit. But I do think in the long run, we've got to continue to talk about this in some different kinds of ways.
Okay.
I agree with that. Yeah, just continuing to think of how do we want to frame this for when we are really coming out and have, you know, kind of in that green stage and can continue these conversations and positioning ourselves. I know one of the big questions that we asked our kids is, you know, it's really easy. They love to make lists. So it was like, what's your top 10 things that you're going to do once things turn green? But then we asked, you know, what are the things that you don't miss? And getting outside, nature, going on walks with my family, those were like the top ones that we kept hearing over and over and over again. So I think really continuing to kind of position that and showing how good it is for our mental health. And these are the things that we're not missing, is that we're getting to enjoy the beauty around us can be really helpful, and kind of keeping that in the back of your mind of you're doing some amazing things. And although it's really chaotic, it's benefiting a whole bunch of people that you're not even knowing that it's helping.
Okay. Hey, I am mindful of the time, and first and foremost, I have two quick requests. First one, if you haven't put your name and email address in the chat box, please do so that we can send you out the chat and a connection to a recording of this roundtable. And the second thing I want to do, and I really mean this, Marissa and Ann, thank you so much for your time and your wise words. We really, really appreciate it here. We're all in this together, and to get your perspective is great. And I hope we can call upon you again sometime.
Absolutely, and so appreciative of all the things that you all are doing. I think it's you play such a critical role in our communities, and you know, bless your hearts for trying to figure it all out in terms of how people can be accessing the outdoors in ways that really will contribute to their mental health. So thank you for all the things you're doing.
Yes.
And I echo that. Thank you, everyone. And please, we have license or permission now. At the end of the day today, you can all go out and enjoy a long 3-day weekend, okay?
Hey, and these shirts will be coming to everybody, I'm sure, soon. Start going.
Very good.
Everywhere.
Stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.